Committee's in order. We will now proceed. I'm going to give everybody about another, I don't know, a couple of minutes to get their video on. Take a deep breath, get yourself organized, and we will take up Mr. Lamborn in about 120 seconds. Start counting, Doug. We'll be good to go. So I don't know. I thought that worked out pretty well. I'm kind of pleased with the prior planning. So the first question to all the generals is, what do the 5 P's stand for? Prior planning prevents, okay, blank performance. Keep in mind that we have a good audience here. Okay, we're going to go at it. I'm watching my clock. I'm anxious to get going here, but I'm going to wait the full one more minute, Doug. In order, Doug Lamborn has the next set of questions.
All right, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for each of the panelists for being here today. As I mentioned in my statement, I believe that we need to develop more ways to increase the supply of young people joining the skilled labor market to meet these future demands. Not everybody needs a 4-year college degree, but our nation needs more men and women who are working in skilled trades. So what are your services doing on this front? And General Gamble, I believe you mentioned an apprenticeship program. We'll start with you.
Congressman, thanks for your question. I think one of our best examples is the Anniston Army Depot. I called it an apprenticeship program. I think they officially call it the internship program. It's the Anniston Army Depot High School Internship Program. I've personally visited. I believe you have as well. It's where they take high school students to help them gain skilled trades and that feed our knowledgeable workforce. They're recruited from high schools not only immediately, but from a 55-mile radius of Anniston Army Depot. So, a pretty broad program there focused on allied trades, things, as you said, skills that they can use for a career. They also have something called the Pathways Program. It's a 3-phase program that helps interns move from high school to technical college tuition assistance. So again, extracurricular to the depot, but providing a pathway for high school students to get advanced training in the public sector and then move non-competitively to a position working for the government. And that conversion is based on space availability. It's not, the program falls short of guaranteeing them a slot. Frankly, I'm not sure we need to, that a permanent assured position is a positive thing because like many of other programs that the Army runs, it feeds the local community as well as feeding our workforce. And the last thing that Anniston does, the third of 3, is educational community partnership. It's an agreement that's based on developing opportunities with local colleges, provide for integration of a student's academic studies, and provide on-the-job experience. That repeats itself all the way from Kaiserslautern, Germany, in one of our industrial facilities in Germany, all the way to Rock Island, Illinois, but I just illuminated Anniston. We can provide details and more comprehensive paper if you'd like, sir.
Okay, and I'd like to hear from the Navy, Air Force, and Marines on this same issue.
Hey, sir, Admiral here. I'll jump in on this. Hey, so at the 4 public shipyards, we have a very active apprenticeship program. It's a 4-year program that we recruit people into from the local communities. We've got partnerships in place generally with the local community colleges. So it's an opportunity for the apprenticeships to earn an associate's degree along the way. And then once we get them in the shipyard, each shipyard has their own learning center established. And, I'll use Portsmouth as an example, where they actually have a mock-up of a compartment on board a submarine that they would take, whether it be a pipe fitter or maybe an insulator or an electrician in, to allow them to essentially kind of work through a work package, if you will, before they actually go and do that, transmit and go down to the submarine. We also, each yard also has its own, within those learning centers, their own skills areas where we train on welding or electrical or ship fitting, metalwork, and whatnot. So we do a lot of that. The other thing that we've also recently done is we've executed an interagency agreement to pilot with the new OPM USA Learning Tool, which, as you know, is the kind of a modern IT platform for training that really allows us to kind of open up and make it available to even more people inside the shipyard, these training opportunities. So that's available to folks that are going through that 4-year apprentice program that I talked to, as well as others. And then the other thing that we've got within the shipyard is a kind of an assessment process where the supervisors can if they identify a shipmate that maybe needs a little bit more work in a particular area or whatever, there's a process to kind of send them back through maybe just a particular part of the training that allows them to kind of refresh that skill set that maybe they might be maybe a little bit lacking on. So those are some of the things that we're doing. But the apprenticeship program that we have at all 4 shipyards and the learning center are absolutely key and foundational to the way we train our workforce. Thank you for the opportunity.
Sure. And Air Force and Marines, do you have similar options going, or a Navy Air?
It's our Naval Aviation, similar apprenticeship program, 270 currently in that apprenticeship program, and we're using it to try to build loyalty to the depot, so once we train these folks, they don't get pulled away by someone else. Over.
Air Force, Marines, anything to add?
Mr. Lamborn, this is Air Force. Similar to the other services, we continue to bolster and expand our vocational partnerships with the states and the regions. They use our forecast to prioritize their training. We have internships and apprenticeships, which bring them in. And similar to Vice Admiral, it does grow loyalty, and we tend to hire those as well. So we're also expanding our educational partnership agreements with higher education. We've got those in Utah, Oklahoma, and Georgia now. They're very effective to get that STEM workforce we need for our engineering workforce. And the third component would be innovation centers at each of our locations. To give you one example, here I'm in Middle Georgia this week at Robins Air Force Base. And Monday, with Congressman Scott's help, we're going to cut the ribbon on a new facility for our software team. But it has a dedicated classroom for local high school students to come into to get mentored and instructed. And so we see those folks as future employees. Over.
Sir, on the Marine Corps front, very same thing. I would just second the Pathways program. We use that extensively, especially in the depot for welders, painters, and heavy mechanics, heavy vehicle mechanics. Looking to the future, though, we have to make sure that we're zeroing in on C4I type equipment, electronics, coders, those types of things. So we work closely with high schools on internship programs through Pathways, and then also our community colleges, namely Albany Tech here within Southwest Georgia. I think that's worth mentioning.
Okay, very good. Well, I'm glad to hear from each of you that you're making concrete steps to accomplish that goal. This is a question for the Army. Both the Air Force and the Navy received CARES Act funding to increase cash balances last year to offset the impact of COVID. Since the Army didn't get those cash funds, how is the Army dealing with that funding need?
Thank you, sir. Thanks for your question. So there are really 2 components to this. First is our Army Working Capital Fund. And at the time, we honestly didn't think we needed a cash infusion into the Working Capital Fund to offset safety leave, the increased cost of health and safety leave. Because while we put some on leave, as you know, others worked overtime and longer hours to keep the production running. The state of the OCOF today is we have significant concerns inside the Army about the cash balance in our Army Working Capital Fund. And General Daly, our AMC Commanding General, and our Assistant Secretary of the Army for Finance Management and Comptroller are working and pulled, we call them pulling levers, right? We're taking action to restore our cash balance. We do believe the Army will need a cash infusion into the Working Capital Fund later this year. We estimate that to be between $600 and $900 million. We're working that inside the Army and with OSD. But there's almost no doubt in our mind that in the next 6 to 8 months, we will need a cash infusion to keep the Army Working Capital Fund solvent to the level where it can continue to produce the readiness it produces today. So today we're not in bad shape. We are concerned and we're watching it closely.
All right, thank you. Mr. Chairman, back to you.
Thank you very much, Doug. The heads up to everybody, the next two will be Courtney Wilson, Luria, and Moore. I think that's 4. So Courtney, Wilson, Luria, Moore, in that order. Joe, your turn. Go.
Great. Thank you, John, and thank you, Doug, for holding this hearing, and to all the witnesses for their testimony on a very important issue. Admiral Galinas, it's good to see you. The last time I in person was up in Maine, -0 temperatures, and I want to again zero in on one aspect of your testimony, which again, first of all, there is universal agreement about the need to recapitalize all the public yards, and frankly, that's been the case on HASC for a number of years. And the SIOP program, I think, sort of is somewhat evidence of that. And anything we can do, to enhance authorities to accelerate that process and ensure that the turnaround for subs and ships is going to improve. I mean, again, there's just across the board help. Having said that, I mean, it's pretty clear that we're not going to be there for a while. And a number of years ago, we had the Congressional Budget Office take a look at the question of whether private yards, which sometimes get utilized, for overflow work, cost that much more in terms of per unit costs versus public yards. And CBO came back with a pretty strong report that, in fact, there is no disparity in terms of cost, in terms of using private yards, whether it's Newport News, EB, Pascagoula, whatever. And so, first of all, I just want to first of all get your take in terms of whether or not you still regard sort of the one shipyard concept, which your predecessor a couple times removed, Admiral McCoy, articulated and really did try to plug in work when, again, there was an overflow as a way of, dealing with backlog and also just obviously stabilizing the industrial base, or whether or not you think that, at this point, you just want to go to a exclusively public yard approach in terms of dealing with repair and maintenance.
Yes, sir. No, Representative Courtney, thank you for that question. So what I would tell you, one of the things that we're doing as part of the, I mentioned the Naval Shipyard Sustainment Effort, but one of the key elements of that is the development of a 15-year public sector maintenance plan. So this is all of the work that we're doing inside the public shipyards, and we're getting close to finishing that up here within the next month or so, and briefing that up to leadership inside the Navy. But I would tell you just my preliminary indications of this, and as I mentioned in my opening statement, the SIOP program is fundamental to what we're doing to build that productive capacity that we need inside our public shipyards to do the nuclear maintenance. Even with that being said, I believe, given the what we see as an increasing force structure, especially in the submarine force toward the end of the 20s and into the early 30s, we are going to need capacity in the private sector to do submarine repair work. And that's kind of an initial take on what I see in that coming out of that study. That being said, to your point on the one shipyard concept, that is absolutely true. And we typically, every day we're moving resources, from one yard to another to kind of balance the workload as we need to do so. We are taking a hard look at the work that we are doing inside the shipyards. And as I said, back that productive capacity that we're trying to build, where we're doing work inside of a public shipyard that maybe we could outsource to industry. So not an entire availability, but as you know, we do a lot of work on rotatable pools and repairable items. Is that work, would that be more efficient to do that work, outside in private industry? So, maybe not at another private shipyard, but there's a lot of good machine shops and, smaller businesses that could probably use some of that work. So that's also part of our strategy to increase that capacity. So, those are a couple of things that we're looking at. That 15-year plan, we've got to get that. I think that's fundamental to what we're doing. And then looking for opportunities where we don't maybe necessarily outsource an entire availability, but some of the what we refer to as other productive work, as you know, inside the shipyards that we can outsource. And then just to keep the focus on the SIOP. And the first part of your question on authorities, sir, I think I have all the authorities I need right now to go and execute that SIOP program. So thank you for that question, sir.
Great. Well, John, when that 15-year plan becomes available, I hope, again, our subcommittee will jump on that, because in some ways it's almost as important as the 30-year shipbuilding plan. And I applaud the fact that NAVSEA is going that route. I'll yield back.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Courtney. We now turn to Mr. Wilson.
Thank you, Chairman Garamendi and Ranking Member Lamborn. And I just I'm so impressed and appreciative of our panel today, what dedicated individuals you are, and how impressive it is and inspiring to know that we have such capable persons serving in our military. With General Kirkland, a question. I recently toured the McEntire Joint Air Base here in South Carolina, which is a leading candidate for the upcoming F-35 basing selection. In addition to the extraordinary trained personnel at McEntire, the unique qualifications of the site include virtually no encroachments. It just simply could not be recreated anywhere in continental United States. I would like to know, what is your depot posture to support the critical weapon systems such as F-35 while maintaining your other priorities?
Congressman Wilson, thank you for the question. Sir, with respect to McEntire, I'll just like to address the question fleet-wide. Sir, I think you're aware that 70% of the F-35 costs are related to sustainment, and therefore we pay particular attention to that. We're working with the Joint Program Office and our Navy Marine Corps teammates. We continue to partner with the JPO to drive down sustainment costs because, sir, the Air Force is fully committed to the F-35 and its fifth-gen capabilities. Sir, I'll speak with, we currently do a depot modification on the aircraft at our Ogden ALC. We are on path to continue to expand that. This year alone, our forecast has increased from 47 to 52 aircraft output. Sir, we own the F-135 engine maintenance. It's the only heavy maintenance center in the enterprise right now, and that has our full attention to drive down costs and increase the output. But sir, perhaps the low-hanging fruit and where we can really save money is in software. You're familiar with the ALICE program being replaced by the ODIN, the Operational Data Integrated Network. We are proud the Sustainment Center will be part of that solution as we migrate from ALICE to ODIN, and we believe we will do it with our organic software team in a very cost-effective manner.
Thank you very much. And Admiral Galinas is a very grateful Navy dad. I appreciate your service. And a question I have for you is how, with the impressive technician pipeline program that you have for virtual learning tools of hands-on and practical exercise, how has the pandemic impacted your ability to continue the necessary hands-on training required to maintaining your workforce?
Yes, sir. No, thank you for that question. So, we've been very fortunate that, I'll say since the pandemic started roughly a year ago, we have not closed any of our shipyards for a single day. That's both in the public and the private sector. And I give a lot of credit that to the shipyard leadership, as certainly the workforce inside the shipyard. So we have been able to continue both our recruitment, our hiring, and our training efforts over the last year, and we've been able to maintain a pretty steady flow of folks into the shipyard, continue to get them through the pipeline. The other thing, sir, that I'm sure you're aware of is, when we went into the pandemic and we looked at the potential impacts on the yards, we activated our surge main force, and so that is a group we brought on active duty about 1,300 reserve sailors that are aligned to the 4 public shipyards, and their reserve time is to train, with the shipyards. Okay, so when we have a shipyard, continue to get them through the pipeline. The other thing, sir, that I'm sure you're aware of is, when we went into the pandemic and we looked at the potential impacts on the yards, we activated that we would have pushed off, and so we've been able to not totally eliminate that, but certainly mitigate a lot of that impact. So I guess the short answer to your question is we've been able to continue that, and the distance learning, the IT certainly played a big part of that. But even getting folks through the learning centers that I mentioned and everything, we've been able to continue that effort. Yes, sir.
Admiral, thank you very much. And my time is up. But again, I want to thank Chairman Garamendi for getting this panel together. Everyone is outstanding. Thank you very much. I yield back.
Chairman Garamendi, I believe you're muted. Are you calling on me?
I am calling on you, yes. Your
Well,
turn,
thank
5
you.
minutes.
Well, thank you. Well, thank you, gentlemen, for being here to talk about these very important issues. I just wanted to start by saying that I think we can't wait any longer to make the investments that we need to in our ship maintenance infrastructure. Investing both our public and our private yards has the effect of adding increased capacity to our fleet in the near term. And if you listen to Admiral Davidson's testimony last week, Commander of U.S. Indo-PACOM, we need that capacity sooner rather than later. So I just want to say that I think that we need to act now. And I concur with Representative Courtney's comments that the shipyard optimization plan is incredibly critical. And I think we need to speed it up. And I'm sort of surprised to hear that you don't feel, Admiral Galinas, that you need any additional authorities or any additional resources to do that. But, I'd really like to be a very strong advocate from this committee and this subcommittee to make sure that you have those resources, because I think the ship maintenance resources are absolutely critical to getting our ships out deployed, providing that forward presence that we need to counter Chinese in the Western Pacific. And I really feel like we need to shift from that mantra that I feel like we have today, where maintenance is driving operations rather than maintenance is supporting and enabling operations. So I just wanted to ask you again, do you need any additional authorities, resources? Ideally, what could we do to speed this up to give that increased capacity? And I'll just quickly give the other example of recently at Norfolk Naval Shipyard. We had the CVN 77 in dry dock and in a docking availability that was going to last 27 months. In a Nimitz class, first docking availability in their life cycle, that should have been about 10 and a half months. And the domino effect of that and the dual deployments of the carriers we've seen over the last year, are all impacted by that maintenance backlog. So can you just comment again on anything else that this committee or Congress can do to help speed up your building of your capacity and modernization of the shipyards?
Yes, ma'am. No, thank you for that question, Representative Luria. So let me just to be clear, at this point, I don't believe I need any additional authorities. I did not say we may not need additional resources, because we are working through that right now, and there's a potential we may need additional resources. Okay. One of the things that I've asked the team to look at is, we kind of notionally rolled out, I'll say, a 20-year plan. I asked them to go back and look at what it would take, to do this capitalization in 10 years and 15 years. And so we're working through that right now. as you well know, one of the things to doing that is being able to integrate the recapitalization work along with the ship repair work that we need to do. And to your point on maintenance, driving, fleet operations, I agree with you on that. It's an area we certainly need to get better. Personally, I think it starts with our planning efforts. Okay, as we build that work package for the ships and the carriers and the submarines going into our public yards, and then once we get them in there, it's all about execution, and we just need to be relentless in that. There are things we're doing to strengthen that. We talked, and I'll just give you 3 quick examples. One is the amount of unplanned work that we push into availabilities once the availability starts. And as you well know, once that happens, and especially if it comes in later in the availability, that's absolutely going to impact your ability to get that submarine or that aircraft carrier out of the yard on time. And so, whether it's rework, whether it's growth work or new work that you don't plan to do once you get in there is very impactful in a negative way. The second item that we're looking at is just what I'll call shop efficiencies, and we're finding some real opportunities within all 4 of our shipyards, quite frankly, to improve the efficiency of our shops, to kind of push work from the shop areas down to the waterfront on board the submarine. A key piece of this, and we've had some of these discussions previously, is the availability of parts, whether those are parts coming from the supply system, those depot level repairable or rotatable pool items that I talked about, just having that available to the mechanic when they need it to get that work done and to continue that process moving. And then the third part of this is really just, I'll just say it's availability management. And I mentioned the Naval Ship Sustainment Effort Shipyard that we're working right now. We brought in, as you know, a group, the Boston Consulting Group, to kind of a world-class, process improvement company that really, brings some best practices from the commercial enterprise that we can look to leverage and incorporate into our shipyards. And just the way we kind of think about when you come up, as you work through an availability and you come up with, unplanned work, or you have an efficiency item, or something that may cause additional time in there, how do we work our way through that in a very expeditious and efficient manner? And frankly, we've kind of lost, I'll say, our edge in that area a little bit. So those are just 3 areas that we're getting after, ma'am, on that area.
Well, thank you for those comments, and I know that my time has expired, and I think that those are critical areas that do need improvement. And what we are asking as the committee is, what do you need from us? What do you need from Congress to implement this? Because it's not just about building ships in the Sea Power Subcommittee, it's about maintaining and using the ships that we have as most efficiently as possible. And a big piece of that is maintenance and getting that maintenance done on time. So thank you again for your comments, and I also wanted to thank Rear Admiral Verhaeghe at the NAVSEA War Room. I was able to spend a couple hours with him a few weeks ago and got some insights on the surface fleet side into some of the process improvements that you're making, and really want to be supportive of those. So thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you very much, Elaine. We now turn to, I'm going to give you the next 4 members in order: Moore, Spear, Bergman, Scott. Moore, Spear, Bergman, Scott. Mr. Moore, your turn.
Thank you, Chairman. Sincerely, thank you all for being here today. My questions will primarily be directed towards General Kirkland. General Kirkland, it's great to get a chance to interact again. And again, appreciate your opening statements as well, especially bringing up the importance of STEM and some of those hiring needs. I hope to get a chance to chat with you about that. The organic industrial base, it's essential to the repair and maintenance of the nation's complex array of weapon systems. And a minimum investment requirements designed to only sustain depot performance have left a majority of depots in poor condition, relying on equipment far past its service life. And a course of action to reinvigorate our organic industrial bases requires educating members of Congress on why these facilities are needed, uniting mutual interests across service branches, holding DoD accountable to modernizing efforts and to improve readiness and reduce costs. I am thrilled to be a co-chair of a bipartisan group for the House Depot Caucus. Ogden Air Logistics Complex is in my district, and I know that optimization plans and investment strategy recently just mentioned about in a results-oriented management approach with even some consulting firms that will help us fortify existing optimization plans and maintain that superiority. General Kirkland, the first questions I'll ask is, the Air Force depots employ predominantly civilian personnel. How can this committee best help the services where hiring challenges are concerned? How can we best help, in your opinion?
Congressman Moore, thank you for that question, and I look forward to working with forming your leadership depot caucus. Sir, with respect to your question about civilian personnel, correct. 99% or more of our depot workforce are patriotic civilian employees, Air Force civilians. And sir, I mentioned in my opening comment about how we use DHA and EHA, the Direct Hiring Authority. It is a tremendous tool for us for both recruiting and hiring. It allows us to be more creative, agile, strategic, and candidly also allows us to leverage social media and online databases to attract and recruit employees. Some data, sir, 4 years ago in calendar year 17, our traditional hires for external organization averaged more than 180 days. Last year, using DHA, we got that into the low 60s. And so that is just treating our employees with a lot more respect and makes us more efficient when we have a vacancy. Over those same 4 years, sir, we've gone from 700 or so hires using DHA to over 3,000. So this is a tool that continues to expand in its use. Our Air Force added this to the FY22 Personnel Legislative Review, and we're going to resubmit for 23 as well. Our non-depot workforce, many of them at our installation support the depot or related activities, 68% of those hired are still using traditional methodology. So there is a lot of upside if we could expand and use DHA and EHA more. Congressman, I would add to that an appeal to consider a clean repeal of the 180-day waiting period for retired military members. We are at a disadvantage against our commercial industry peers to retain that talent and experience and specialized skills and security clearances as they leave active duty Air Force and retire. Many of them come back to us eventually, but there is a large group that we do not have access to as they immediately seek employment after retirement. Thank you, Congressman.
Excellent. Thank you. I appreciate that perspective. Let me switch gears quickly to the optimization program. So the shipyard, the Naval Sea Systems Command Shipyard Infrastructure Program is a 20-year, $21 billion effort to modernize infrastructure at shipyard facilities. Do you see a need for comprehensive plan to recapitalize and modernize the entirety of the organic industrial base? That's also to you, General Kirkland.
Congressman, absolutely. As we lay out our organic industrial base plan, and to Chairman Garamondi's point, even though it's a 20-year plan, we are focused primarily on the first 5 years of that. Our three alternatives go 5, 5, and 10 across that. So, sir, our targeted use of the 6% investment, which the Air Force is averaging at 8% right now, are taking care of much of those immediate needs to restructure our depots, build dedicated functional campuses and the like to make us more effective and optimized for the future.
Excellent. And then as my entree, my first quarter in politics and in these committees, I'm realizing how fast 5 minutes go. So I will yield back. Thank you very much for your time. I'll yield back, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moore. One of the things that I want to just take a moment here is that all of the forces have a plan. We usually see that plan after it has been scrubbed by every other part of the Department of Defense. And it comes to us in a abbreviated or a slow implementation. Basically meaning that the depots often are of a lower priority for the entire department than some other activity. The purchase of a new aerial platform, a new set of ships, or whatever. And it is the work of this committee to push the depot, the maintenance, to a higher priority. To do that, we need to know before all the scrubbing and all the elimination, what is necessary. And so we're going to pursue that. And so heads up, admirals and generals, we're coming at you looking for what you initially needed, not what finally came out in the president's budget. So you know where we're going. If you care to help us, there are ways of getting us information formally, and we would expect that. We're now going to Ms. Spear. Jackie, you're up. Hello, Jackie. May not have come back from the various offices. We'll go to Mr. Bergman. Jackie, your final try here. Okay, Mr. Bergman.
Well, Chairman, thank you. You got close. You traded, when I grew up, my name was Jackie, so I'll just substitute one Jackie for another with this, okay?
We'll take that up with the other Jackie, but in the meantime.
Well, mine was with a Y. I did the same thing with Jackie Rosen when we got here at our first term. But anyway, the point is, thanks for the hearing. Thanks for the education. I believe that in listening to my colleagues who've already spoken, I'm really not going to ask any more because sometimes we re-ask the same questions. All I would suggest to you, those of you in uniform who are dialoguing with us today, is that at best, you know, in your business, you've got to have at least an 80% solution out the door. And then as it moves forward, you've got to, if you will, adjust the other 20% to make sure that that ship is deployable to the fight. And what we look for, I believe, on our side of the aisle is that solid, if you will, to be alliterative here, pragmatic, proactive, professional prioritization of your efforts so that we can provide the funding necessary and that you can show us where the exceptions need to be as soon as you see the need for exception. That helps us do our work. So with that, Mr. Chairman, in the spirit of things, I'll yield back the rest of my time and look forward to the next event as an update.
I'm going to go back to Jackie Spear. If she's on, we'll take her now. Apparently not. Ms. Spear, your turn. Very good. We're going to go to Mr. Scott then, and then we may start a second round of questions depending on where we are. Good. Austin?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Kirkland, glad to have you at Robins Air Force Base. Look forward to seeing you next week. I know that you've spoken to a lot of the issues with software. One of the things that is happening at Robins Air Force Base is the Advanced Air Force, or the Air Force Advanced Technology and Training Center, where they are using technologies like 3D printing and other new advanced technologies for manufacturing parts that in some cases have been obsolete, and in other cases we're simply being charged significantly more than we should be charged for those parts. What efficiencies are you seeing from investments in these new technologies like 3D printing, robotics, and artificial intelligence? How are you continuing to foster innovation in the sustainment enterprise? And as much as we're happy to have the Air Force Advanced Technology and Training Center in Robins Air Force Base, at Robins Air Force Base, do you have the intent of doing similar facilities in other locations?
Congressman Scott, thank you, sir, for the question. Let me respond in 2 points real quickly. First, sir, you mentioned robotics at Warner Robins Air Logistics Complex. Happy to report the investments of the last 4 years have really, the advantages are we've removed 60 personnel from a hazardous environment. We've saved $5 million in automation savings, and we've reduced our hazardous material stream. All part of that, sir, while getting more aircraft components out the door at a better cost. We are partnered with the Rapid Sustainment Office in Lifecycle Management Center, which actually, sir, operates the ATTC you mentioned. We are partnered with them across a wide spectrum of advanced technologies. In conditions-based maintenance plus alone, sir, we've collaborated on our asks, our formal pump ask to the Air Force will be 160 million now over the FIDEP. And that is necessary for us to expand CBM at the rate we need to and have its advantages. Sir, with respect to ATTCs, there is, I believe, one being put in at Ogden outside in Utah, and I will also say there's one in Pittsburgh. But I'll have to take for record, sir, their entire plans to expand those units. Thank you.
Well, Chairman Garamendi, one, I would like to invite you and the other members of the committee down to Robins Air Force Base to look at what's happening at not just at Robins as a whole, but at the Advanced Technology and Training Center. Obviously, while our private sector partners are an integral part of our national security, there are certain things that they do sometimes that very much irritate me with regard to how much they charge for certain parts that should cost small amounts. General, when we get into the software related issues, you mentioned this briefly, but one of the frustrations I think of the committee and of myself is that as we have paid the private sector to develop software, then they have turned around and said, well, now we own it, even though we paid the original cost of developing it. The new software, the Synergy Innovation Complex and other things, will we be developing our own software, or will we be predominantly updating the software that we have in our current platforms?
Congressman Scott, thank you for that question. The answer is both, sir. We have expanded our historic software maintenance mission now left into the cycle and do an awful lot of software development in support of our military weapon system program offices. And sir, you mentioned, you're referring to intellectual property, I believe, that is often a boundary for us and we cannot get past. And so we work with the support program offices for legacy platforms because there are sustainment opportunities that we're missing. The better news, sir, is that for newer weapon systems in acquisition like B-21 and GBSD, those programs are being very innovative and doing the right things contractually now so that we will benefit with IP access for the life cycle of that weapon system. Thank you.
General, my time is up, but you summed up one of the things, doing the right things contractually, and that's an error that we've made as a country in the past, that I'm glad that we're not continuing to make those errors. I look forward to seeing you on Monday, and gentlemen, appreciate everything you do for the country. I yield back.
And thank you very much. You're on a series of questions there on the data, the availability of it. We're going to work, this committee is going to work very closely with the acquisition committees, including the appropriations, to deal with the ongoing problem of who owns the rights to the software, to the intellectual, and actually to the data itself. So we're going to go at that in full on. I see Ms. Spear has returned. Jackie, you have 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, can you hear me? I can barely
Yes,
hear
we can.
you.
You're good to go.
Hold on one second.
You're good to go, Jackie.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I have a question for General Kirkland and Vice Admiral Peters. At the oversight hearing in last year, I think, we focused on the problems with the F-35 logistics system, Alice, which has never worked well and is very burdensome to personnel. What Lockheed keeps saying they're fixing it. I'm curious as to whether or not it has been replaced. At one point, they were talking about replacing it. And have you seen any improvements?
Ma'am, this Congresswoman, thank you for your question. I guess I'll go first. Ma'am, I'll need to take for record what our Air Force is seeing in terms of improvement, because it's both operational and supply chain. I would not want to hazard or get outside my lane there. But ma'am, I can tell you that we are working to control our future with respect to F-35 software through hands-on ownership of the transition from Alice to the new Odin system. It is currently being led by our Kessel Run software factory in the Northeast, and they will soon transition and expand to the Air Force Sustainment Center Enterprise, mostly centered at our Ogden ALC out in Utah. Thank you.
Ma'am, I'll follow that discussion by just mentioning that we do continue to work very closely with the F-35 Joint Program Office to make sure that Alice is functional for the F-35C and its first deployment with VFA 147 on USS Vinson coming up here in the fall. And to date, that is working. There are many, many problems associated with Alice, as you mentioned. The overall plan is to transition that system to Odin, and I think a key, as General Kirkland mentioned, is to make sure that the Navy and the Marine Corps and the Air Force are participating in that development, so that we're not completely dependent on the prime contractor. We pay exorbitant fees for the administration and the maintenance of Alice, and so this is all part of the Joint Program Office's plan to reduce costs and to make that system more effective. I agree with you completely that it is a difficult system. Over.
But how do we hold them accountable? As you pointed out, it's been very expensive. They were supposed to provide us with a system that works. It's never worked, and we keep paying for the fact that it doesn't work and paying all the maintenance costs. It just seems like, you know, stupid is as stupid does. Why are we doing the same thing over and over again?
I think we're completely invested now in Alice and completely dependent on that system for the operations. Without it, we can only go a few days of flying. So we have to work with the prime contractor to make sure that we can get to the next segment here, to first maintain what we have and then to upgrade it. And similar to what General Kirkland said, this is probably a better question for the Joint Program Office and you know, OSD, but we are in full cooperation with the Joint Program Office to make that happen, ma'am.
All right, then let me ask this. Do any of the parts for the F-35 come from China? Does anyone know?
I will take a stab at that, just to say that we track, you know, the main components very closely, and I don't know of any main components on the aircraft that come from China. As you go down into the supply chain at the third or fourth tier, it's very likely that there are some electronic parts that come from China, but we'll have to take that one for the record to get you a more detailed response, ma'am.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know my time is almost expired. Let me just suggest that as we think about readiness in the future and the maintenance of our equipment, we've got to be very careful about any parts coming from China and the potential for malware to be embedded into any of that equipment or parts. So I would just like to put that front and center and make sure that we're all operating with our eyes wide open. And with that, I yield back.
Ms. Spear, thank you very much. Indeed, it is a major concern. The entire F-35 system is of enormous concern to the committee. The chairman has weighed in on this in a very big and important way this last week. There are numerous meetings going on. I'll make sure that all of my subcommittee members know of those meetings. The F-35 is a huge problem. And one of the principal problems is that we buy more planes. We're not able to maintain the older ones. So the more we buy, the worse the overall performance has been. That is going to stop. There is a very deep concern in this committee about the F-35 overall, including the issue you raised, Jackie. And for General Kirkland, the hearing yesterday in the Strategic Arms Subcommittee was extraordinarily troublesome. To the question that Ms. Spear raised about, by the way, where's all that stuff coming from as you put together all these new platforms, and particularly the electronics, the software and the like. It is an enormous concern across all of this. And ultimately, it comes down to the folks that are here in uniform. You're going to be left with, okay, how do you fix it? And I don't know that we have an answer. So we got to start where Ms. Spear is, and that is you start with doing it right in the first place. And so, Jackie, stay on the issue. It's an important one. We are formally past the time of the hearing. We were supposed to end about now. We took a half-hour break. In between, if the presenters are willing to stick around, I know that there's another round of questions from Mr. Lamborn. I know Ms. Lurie has one. I certainly have about another 5 hours of questions that I'm not going to ask. Doug, you're shaking your head. Was that a yes? You are finished. You're finished. Okay. I read your lips, didn't hear your sound. Ms. Lurie, another round of questions?
Yes, well, thank you, Chairman Garamendi, and thank you to the witnesses for willing to stay a little bit longer and answer some additional questions. Our primary focus, I think, should be what we're going to do to increase our presence in the Western Pacific and counter to the Chinese threat. And, you know, in the Sea Power Subcommittee, we can talk about building more ships. But the other part is, there's 3 parts to this. Building more ships as quickly as we can, operating the ships that we have as efficiently as possible, which, you know, maintenance fits into that, and then not divesting of the ships we have that still have usable life. So I want to touch on those last 2 things, and I think we already talked about, you know, the maintenance and whether maintenance drives operations or getting back to maintenance supporting operations. But, you know, the last piece of that is that the Battle Force 2045, the plan that the last administration put out, I feel like we didn't get a lot of good background information on what the assumptions were made that helped to build that plan. Some of those assumptions are driven by the potential adversary and how we would respond to that. But some of those assumptions are driven by our capacity of the industrial base to build ships, our capacity of our, you know, repair community to repair those ships and get them back out on deployment as quickly as possible. But the other piece is we can't decommission ships faster than we can build them. So that plan does have us decommissioning, I think, 10 cruisers in a very short period of time. And, you know, I lived it. I served as the XO on a cruiser, the USS Anzio. We had a 14-foot crack in the hangar bay. We had a lot of issues, and we had not had any of the HM&E upgrades that some of the other ships had had. But knowing that the combat system upgrades are possible due to the architecture of the Aegis system, and knowing that we've invested a sizable amount of money in several of our cruisers, I would really like to know, Admiral Galinas, some perspective on, you know, hull by hull. Can you provide us information on those cruisers that still have remaining life? I think we need them as air defense platforms. We can't build Flight 3 DDGs faster than we're planning on decommissioning the cruisers. And so I'd really like to, and you might not be able to provide the granular information at this hearing today, but have that information hull by hull on what upgrades have been done to the cruisers and what the estimated cost would be to extend their lifetime.
Yes, ma'am. No, that's a great question. So, yes, I will. I'll take for the record to get back with you on a hull by hull assessment. We can certainly provide that to you. What I will tell you, you know, on the decommissioning of ships, and we did take a hard look at that, and it really, you know, in some cases we're, I'll say, divesting of legacy capability that. In some cases, it really is costing us a lot to maintain, and we're just not getting, I'll say, the return on investment from a warfighting capability standpoint. So, you know, we make those trades, but it's also an opportunity to kind of, you know, reinvest that money into new capabilities. And we've got a number of, as you well know, new ship designs, you know, either in the shipyard in the case of the frigate program up at Marionette. You know, we're looking closely now at at the DDGX program, and that's quickly starting to evolve. The light amphibious warship is coming along. We're also looking to recapitalize the logistics ships as well as a lot of the work that we're doing in the unmanned system. So I think and then not to mention what we're doing on the submarine side as well with some early design work on the SSNX, right? So, I think we're kind of, I'll say, at a little bit of a kind of a transformational moment here, kind of on ship design, especially with the unmanned platforms. And I know there's a lot of discussion.
I'm sorry to cut you off, Admiral. I know you could talk at length about this and we can probably have a separate conversation, but my time is limited. I really just wanted to point out that from our perspective as lawmakers, I feel like there isn't a clear strategy, a clear maritime strategy. Like, what is the goal? Do we need to have more presence there today? And if that's the case, I feel like you would have clear direction to say, I'm focusing all my efforts on getting that, getting everything we have out of the ships that we already have, because we have them and we know their capabilities and their limitations, but we can put them there today and make them part of this complex battle problem. But, without a clear vision like that, it seems like we're all over the place. We are focused on new capabilities. I'm all for, research and development and developing new capabilities. We have had a bad track record on development of several of our last classes of ships and not reaching the full operational capability that we wanted, LCS and the mission modules, DDG 1000. We can talk about those things separately, but, and it's kind of clear in the comments as well that you just made on the previous questions that I asked. I mean, you said we just sort of notionally came up with a 20-year plan for the shipyard optimization. But if you had more clear guidance, you might be saying, darn, I need to get this done in 5 years. And what do we need for that? But I'm just kind of putting all of this into the perspective of, and perhaps you agree or disagree, that there just isn't a clear vision of like what our priority is and what the urgency is. Do you feel like more guidance and vision on that would be helpful for you to prioritize these issues?
Yes, ma'am. No, I feel like we have the right the right guidance and the right strategy out there.
So what is that guidance? Is it the Battle Force 2045? Is it previous 30-year shipbuilding plans? Like, none of the guidance that I see is very granular, and it really doesn't say like this is our #1 priority.
Okay. Yeah, I can see. Maybe with where we stand with the 30-year shipbuilding plan, but the force structure work that's been done, I'll say over the last year or so, I think that provides some pretty good indications in terms of the capabilities required, with a couple of different options on how to equip that force with that capability.
So how much input did you have into that plan? Okay, sorry, Chairman Garamendi. I know my time is.
We're going to try to pay a little bit of attention to the clock. The questions are always good and they're provocative, and you're headed down a path that we need to pay attention to. Some of that path is over in the sea power, and I know that you do sit on that. But all of this tends to come back to this committee. Whatever those ships are, if we're going to hang on to the cruisers, somebody's going to maintain them, and this committee is going to be responsible for that maintenance. So there's an interoperability here between this. One of the things that goes beyond this committee, and I know all of us sit on multiple subcommittees, is the new administration is going to look at its strategies. And sometime probably towards the end of this year, maybe early next year, there will be a new military strategy laid out. China, Russia, whatever, and the Space Force and all the rest. Ultimately, this committee must pay attention to that, because all of that will require continued maintenance and its operational capabilities. And so we'll be engaged in observing what that strategy is, looking at the new equipment, platforms, satellites, et cetera, and then, okay, how's it going to get maintained? What are the resources necessary? What are the facilities necessary? So a lot of what's going on here is in flux. And Ms. Lurie, your question is provocative and necessary. I'm going to, I think all the other members have left. If that's not the case, let me know. You have Mr. Wilson, you are still here. You've got another round of questions. Mr. Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have a final question for General Gamble, and that is, I'm very grateful to represent Fort Jackson. And General Milford Beagle has just been a super leader at the post. We will miss him, but always a problem that has to be addressed. And the word flux comes to mind that the chairman just used, and that is when we have sequestration. And so how is the Army handling the indecisiveness of sequestration, and are we back on track maintaining our capabilities despite the sequestration?
Congressman, thanks for your question. For Fort Jackson in particular, the chief is, that's where we bring in new soldiers and train our future soldiers. It's absolutely decisive to the long-term health of our Army, the flow of young men and women committed to the defense of our nation going through there. The Chief of Staff of the Army has prioritized people first, and all investments associated with that. One of the investments is in predictability of the flow of new recruits coming through our pipeline. During COVID, we thought we would be challenged in recruiting, and we met and exceeded our goals. So I believe, despite flux, as you rightly described it, fluctuations in many things, our economy, our levels of funding, wherever those fluctuations come from, our Army Recruiting Command and the leadership of our leaders at Fort Jackson and Fort Benning and other places where we train our new soldiers has been absolutely, phenomenal to smooth that out. But our leadership of our chief, the support your committee gives us has been absolutely critical to that, sir. Thank you.
Well, and it's so inspiring when I'm at Columbia Airport to see the young recruits coming in with their brown manila envelopes. You know exactly who they are and where they're going, and greeted by the USO, and then to see the very warm welcome by drill sergeants. And so again, thank you for your service. And I know that my military service, 31 years in the Guard, 3 sons who served in the Guard in Iraq, each of Afghanistan, and my youngest son, a good friend of Chairman Garamendi, as an engineer. Military service is so important. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wilson. We have, I believe, all of the members that are still on have had at least one additional round of questioning. So we're going to move to the end of this hearing. A couple of things. I'm going to put a couple of things on the line. General Kirkland, in the most recent hearings, Strategic Arms and the other hearings, the Air Force is going to have a large number of new platforms, extremely sophisticated platforms. Some of this is still classified, some is out there publicly. We need to know, this committee needs to know what are your maintenance plans for those new platforms? I don't want to have another F-35 fiasco. So let's start. We need to know. So, and that goes all the way down from the GBSD to a lot of other things. So I want to have a briefing from you within the next 3 or 4 months about the integration of your maintenance plans with the new platforms. Okay. Some of the others of the Navy, similarly, you have some new things coming on. So how are you going to maintain those? The Marine Corps, you've got a whole new strategy in the Marine Corps. So what does that mean to this committee? We haven't heard yet. We do know that you're about, I guess you're having all of your slightly used Abrams, you're sending them over to the Army, and the Army's going, what the hell did you do to maintain these things? So you guys work that out, but let us know, okay? What might be going on here. So what I'm looking at here is looking at these things from the beginning all the way to the end, and Ms. Lurie was talking about the end. Are the cruisers really going to disappear? Well, there's this whole new China strategy. How does that fit into all of this? So I want to be clear with all of that. Also, we're going to go back at this. At yesterday's hearing, it was classified. I won't take it up now. I'll get to you, General Kirkland, on this in a different format. I've talked a lot about data. I want to hear from all of you about data mining. Somewhere in your records are paper forms of platforms that you're still operating and maintaining, probably going back a decade, maybe 2 or 3 decades. That data may be very useful in determining what you need to repair tomorrow, what's going to break tomorrow, what's going to be required. The Air Force has a good program underway on this. It's going to need to be supported, General Kirkland, with some additional personnel and some additional money, but it is data mining. A lot of historic data. I think it's, if I recall, the C-5, the C-17 specifically, and I believe there's one other platform that you're using as a example. But and then with using that data for analytical analysis of what you need in terms of parts and what's going to break next. Predictive maintenance, I believe, is the word that we decide to settle on. I'm bringing that to your attention. I think it's important enough to really force the money to be made available. And I think it's a small amount of money. For the rest of you that are here, watch closely this best practice, which may be a best practice. If it turns out, I think you're going to know within the next 6 months whether it is or not. If it is, share that best practice across the forces and get ready to go do some data mining. Finally, there are 2 elements that the president is pushing and the Congress, and that's called equity. That is equity in hiring. The minority communities, we've dealt a lot with hiring thus far in the various questions asked by the members. I was going to add early on that equity issue needs to be part of that hiring equation. So keep that in mind. We'll come back and ask you specific questions. If I don't, I guarantee there's about 200 other Democrats are going to ask. So, and quite possibly the president, or at least the vice president. Another one that I know all of us are interested in, and that is the small businesses. It was discussed earlier today, more in passing than in specificity. There are these small business opportunities that exist. I think it was Mr. Scott brought this up around all of the depots. Some of that has to do with the new technologies and the integration of the new technologies. So the small businesses are also an issue that I know the Congress is interested in, both Democrat and Republican side, and they're going to bang on me and I'm going to bang on you. And so pay attention to the small business opportunities that exist around your depots and maintenance facilities. So with that, I've not run my entire string of questions, but probably enough for the hour and plus. Thank you for the willingness to stick around through our 30-minute recess. And with that, I formally adjourn this hearing. Thank you all for your participation.